Imagine this. It is a warm August evening in 1814. Washington, D.C., the brand new capital of the young United States, is quiet. But on the horizon, a glow begins to rise, orange and furious. The glow is fire. The White House, the Capitol, and much of the city are about to be engulfed in flames. And the flames are not an accident. They are lit by British soldiers marching confidently through the capital of their former colonies. It was a night that nearly destroyed the fragile American experiment. And it is a story full of chaos, humiliation, bravery, and one or two miracles. Let's go back a bit. Why did this happen? To understand, you need to know about the War of 1812, a conflict that many Americans today barely remember, but at the time was seen as the Second War of Independence. The United States was still a young nation, only a few decades old, and tensions with Britain had never really gone away after the Revolution. The British Navy had been seizing American sailors, forcing them into service. Trade restrictions were strangling U.S. merchants, and there was suspicion that Britain was supporting Native American resistance on the frontier. For President James Madison, these provocations were too much. In 1812, the United States declared war, but America was not ready. The military was small, underfunded, and badly organized. Britain, despite being locked in a massive war against Napoleon in Europe, still had the world's most powerful navy. For the first 2 years of the war, battles were fought mostly along the Canadian border and at sea. There were some American victories, yes, but also embarrassing defeats. By 1814, after Napoleon's defeat in Europe, Britain finally had troops to spare, and now they could focus fully on America. This is when Washington, D.C. entered the crosshairs. To the British, attacking the capital was both practical and symbolic. Washington wasn't the biggest or richest city in America, but it was the seat of government, the home of Congress, and the residence of the president. Burning it would send a message. Britain could strike at the very heart of the young republic. In August 1814, a British force of about 4,500 soldiers under Major General Robert Ross landed in Maryland. They marched inland, clashing with American forces at the Battle of Bladensburg. The Americans were poorly led and unprepared. President Madison himself rode out to the battlefield, but what he saw was a disaster. U.S. troops broke ranks, many fled, and the road to Washington lay wide open. The British wasted no time. That evening, August 24th, 1814, they entered the capital. The first target, the White House, known then as the President's Mansion. But here's where the story gets almost surreal. Inside, First Lady Dolley Madison had been preparing a dinner party. She had set the table with the finest china, and a full meal was ready. As word came that the British were approaching, she refused to leave until she saved something precious: the large portrait of George Washington. With the help of servants, she cut it from its frame and carried it to safety. That act alone became legendary. Dolley Madison was celebrated as a heroine of the Republic. When the British troops entered the White House, they found the dinner table still set, food untouched, wine ready to pour. And what did they do? They sat down and ate. British officers feasted in the president's home before ordering it set ablaze. Soon, the mansion was burning, flames lighting the night sky. But they didn't stop there. The British also torched the Capitol building, including the Library of Congress, destroying thousands of priceless books. Government offices were reduced to ash. The glow of the burning city could be seen for miles. Ordinary citizens fled in terror, scattering into the countryside. For President Madison, it was a moment of humiliation. He had to flee with his cabinet, riding through the night to find safety. At one point, he became separated from Dolley, who had escaped with the Washington portrait and a handful of valuables. The President of the United States was essentially homeless, wandering farmland while his capital burned. The British intended to cripple the government. But something unexpected happened next. Nature itself intervened. The day after the fires, a powerful storm rolled into Washington. Eyewitnesses described heavy rain, violent winds, and even what seemed like a tornado ripping through the city. The storm doused many of the flames, saving parts of Washington from complete destruction. British soldiers, caught in the chaos, retreated. Some later claimed they saw the storm as an act of divine punishment for their actions. Still, the damage was done. The White House was a charred ruin. The Capitol was gutted. The symbols of the American government lay in ashes. For many, it felt like the country itself was on the brink of collapse. Imagine being an American citizen in 1814. Your army defeated, your capital destroyed, your president in hiding. The United States seemed like it might not survive its first generation. News of the burning spread quickly across the Atlantic. In Britain, many celebrated it as revenge for America's invasion of Canada earlier in the war. European newspapers mocked the United States as an experiment already failing, a republic too fragile to survive its own infancy. But instead of collapsing, this humiliation lit a fire of determination among Americans, who now saw the defense of their nation not just as a political struggle, but as a matter of pride and survival. This disaster became a turning point. Instead of breaking the spirit of the nation, the burning of Washington united Americans. Outrage spread across the country, fueling determination to fight on. Within months, U.S. forces scored key victories, most famously at the Battle of Baltimore, where Francis Scott Key wrote the poem that became the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. By 1815, the war ended in a stalemate with the Treaty of Ghent, and America had proven it could stand up to Britain once again. The White House, of course, was rebuilt. Its blackened walls were repainted, giving rise to the name White House that we still use today. The Capitol, too, was reconstructed, larger and stronger than before. The city that had once been humiliated became a symbol of resilience. Looking back, the night of August 24th, 1814, is remembered as one of America's darkest hours. But it also became a story of survival. Dolley Madison's bravery, the freak storm that saved part of the city, and the eventual rebirth of Washington all turned tragedy into legend. The flames that consumed the White House could have consumed the country. Instead, they forged a stronger sense of national identity. So, the next time you see the gleaming White House on TV, remember that it once stood as a burned-out shell, nearly erased from history by an invading army. And remember, too, that the United States, even in its weakest moment, found a way to rise from the ashes. Because that night in 1814, when the British burned the White House, they almost burned America, too.